Welcome to the virtual community of the Center for Spiritual Living, Napa Valley. I'm Reverend Jay Lang. I'm the spiritual director of this community. Our beliefs are based on ancient wisdom as well as progressive spirituality. Our mission is to show a way to live fully and wholly through the practical application of spiritual principles. Each week, we offer insights and steps on how to heal and reveal the divine truth in each of us and how to help create a world that works for all people and all life on this planet. So thank you for joining us, and we so appreciate your participation in our virtual community. And we also, this time of year, think about it, family is not only this community, but a bigger understanding, a bigger grasp of what family is, that we are one together. And it's a good reminder at this time of the year that we have that opens us up to a greater realization in everything we do, that it is one big family, one love. And thank you, Imelda. For those of us who don't speak Spanish, at least we know what amor means, right? We got that part down. It's sort of like the chorus on a song. Amor, I know that part. But thank you for the diversity and the love you bring as a practitioner. So thank you. So we, it's Happy New Year in all aspects of it, that we open up to life that brings us to this newness, that there's always a hope and a truth, and we make our intentions and our resolutions this time of the year, and hopefully you haven't already broken them, but that does happen. Some people say that the resolutions come in one year and out the other year. And there's always Chinese New Year and Jewish New Year's, so and the truth is that always life is renewing itself. And particularly when we're talking about intentions that are an experience we're seeking to have, we can always renew ourselves and recommit to that intention, that truth, that experience that we want to have, that we're seeking to have. Many of you spent time with family over the last few weeks, and I've been rereading some of Ram Dass's writings in memory of him. And I love this quote in thinking about our families, that if you think you are enlightened, go spend a week with your family. I know, and everybody's going, yeah. How do I turn it off? Oh, your phone? I think Janet could probably help you that. I missed you guys at the 9 o'clock service last week. That there was something missing in my life not to have 9 o'clock. We wanted to have one service to do the big ritual we had around New Year's, but boy, it was something was missing in my mind, in my soul. So it's good to be back here for that. The other thing is, when we talk about this, back to basics that we do this time of the year. That we talk about the beginning chapters of the Science of Mind textbook and come back to the spiritual principles. What I know is that it is back. And it is nowhere and everywhere at the same time. It's absolutely perfect. And sometimes we blame it or curse it for our downfall, but we're also grateful for it in times of prosperity and joy. We talk to it even if we don't see it. And it can only be seen once a year, and know that it can be seen it here. So once a year, I bring it out again, and here is it. So if you wonder where it is here. It's always here, right? Even if we don't see it. And what's fun about this idea, although there's really no representation of spirit that we talk about it, Ernest Holmes, particularly in his very first chapter of the Science Mind textbook, says the thing itself. And it may seem impersonal to call it an it, but we want to refrain from calling it a he or a she, because God doesn't have form, doesn't have gender, doesn't have a body. When we talk about that God created us in the likeness of itself, It's not we created God in our likeness, it's God created us in its likeness. So in consciousness, and it's been said that spirit is the center. Spirit is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. That's something to meditate on. But the bottom line is, it is nowhere and everywhere at the same time, because it is not in a particular spot. We can identify sometimes, and for our prayers and our time just thinking about things, sometimes we do think of God or Spirit or Yahweh or Allah, whatever we call it, a great spirit, divine intelligence, creative power, higher power. Whatever it is, we know it to be right here in our indwelling self, our whole self, the power and the presence that we are. The gratitude of that which is within us, that we can feel it. I like what Ernest Holmes talked about when he said it's both the highermost self and the innermost self is the same God. And it can be revealed to anybody who's willing to connect with it in this way. And so our theme as we roll into the Happy New Year, first of all, is the 2020 vision, spirit of connection. What I like about this theme, this is the same theme for all centers for spiritual living across this nation. 400 centers, and all at this time, or about this time, are talking about this same theme and talking about spiritual connection. And not only the spirit of connection, but the connection of spirit. And we know that this year, as we go through this vision, it's one of mind, body, and soul that is integrated in who we are, that it's important for us to pay attention to not only our spiritual connection, but our connection with our body and our emotions and our life and connection with other people. So it's not only a connection with a greater being, but a connection with each other and a connection with ourselves that we'll be working with and talking about this year. And the January theme in particular today is being spiritually grounded. And what I mean by grounded, grounded in principle, grounded in truth. Now, when you were a child, being grounded, or a teenager, being grounded meant you were in trouble. But sometimes your parents grounded you so you would have the time to reflect on your behavior, or that's what they said at least. And when an airplane is grounded, or flight is grounded, then it's time to make sure that it's ready to take off in flight, that its maintenance is done. There's something that needs to look back. So it's us when we ground ourselves in spiritual principle, whether it's a moment in nature, a moment of meditation, a moment of contemplation, it's a time for us just to reset ourselves and remember what's important, because we can get carried away in the busyness of the day and lose track of ourselves, our true self. I love this next image that's here because it reminds me of me sometimes. When I'm grounded, I can be in the busyness and still be grounded. If you look at this picture and you look to the outside of it, it gets blurry, but you go back to the picture of the person in the middle in the red, and it feels centered and grounded. And we can be that centeredness and groundedness even in the busyness of our day. But sometimes it takes a time to away from the busyness, to find that center, to find that groundedness, so that we can go out in the world and experience this greater truth of who we are, the life abundance in all things that we do, the power and the presence of life. So, and it's a centeredness that we can feel and open to it. And today we begin the first Sunday of the month with the first chapter in the Science of Mind textbook. And it's titled The Thing Itself. And I wanted to kind of bring that to focus that in the beginning there was love, because often people say in the beginning was the Word, or the beginning was God. And really, the word that I want to focus on is love, because God can mean so many different things for so many people, including a word that has negative connotations, because God was a very limited definition of what God was and what God was going to do to us if we didn't behave, or we weren't in the right mind, or we sinned. If we remember that sin is just an old archery term for missing the mark, and we also know and can affirm that God is love. And any talk of God being in the name of God, or a discussion about God that's anything less than comforting, as Meister Eckhart would say, or of separation or division, is a lie. It's that simple. Everything else is man-made. Because God is one of opening and loving and comforting and uniting and affirming, including, not separating. Whether it's children on the border, or divisions of politics, or divisions of between countries. I know myself that I have been saddened by what's happening worldwide right now. I think that whether we needed to respond to Iraq is debatable. But my concern is beyond that. Beyond that, we're thinking that this will escalate, and we don't have to believe that. That there are still choices beyond this. This is not a line in the sand that we have crossed, or that Iraq has crossed, or that anybody's crossed, that we can know a greater truth here. And we can find that in ourselves. So I know that when I take the time to be centered and to ground myself, I can find the greater truth of peace and love within me. And then I can be centered in that, and I can walk in that peace and walk in that love, and know that this is what opens us up. This can spread, this peace and love around us. And we can establish this. And we can hold the truth in consciousness that there is still space between countries, between political parties, between people who might be estranged in your life, a son or a daughter or a parent or a close friend, that there is no place that is a solid line that cannot be crossed. Now, there are people in our lives, I'm not saying we want to invite them into our house for tea, but there can always be reconciliation. There can always be forgiveness. There can always be an opening, because that is the nature of spirit. To love, to include, to find a way of connection, a spiritual connection. That there is no line that is permanently set. That we can find this truth and this deeper connection, and we do that by, in the very beginning, knowing the love within us. That we find. So we go forward in wanting to be connected with it, and wanting to know it, and understanding spirit. The first way is to spend time with it. Just like a friend that we want to get to know better. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It doesn't mean you have to have a certain kind of pose or a certain kind of mantra. It doesn't mean that you even have to be at home in your favorite sitting chair. It can be just a moment at a stoplight. It can be a moment in Trader Joe's. It can be a moment walking. I know yesterday I was out walking at Alstrom Park, and it was a good day already, but then I was just struck by how green everything was, and I just paused and just was filled with this feeling of gratitude for life itself. So that moment, it was important, although I was, exercising. I had to get on, I had to get up that hill. I stopped mid-hill and just took it all in, because that moment was important to my soul to breathe in that moment of greenness, that moment of just beingness. Ever how long that moment took, I needed to reconnect with the love that was in me and reconnect with his life. Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan friar and author, said that contemplation is waiting patiently for the gaps to be filled in. It does not insist on quick closure or easy answers. So it means that we sit as long as it takes. We breathe in as long as it takes for us to feel that shift in our consciousness and that we let go of any sadness we might have. Anything less than the greatness of spirit within us. And for me, sometimes it takes a few minutes and sometimes it takes a few hours. And that's okay. Either way, but I wait for it in knowing that the intentional power of love is always within me, and I simply can wait for it. David White, I don't know if you know him, he's an Irish poet, a great writer. I was rereading a book of his called Crossing, I can't remember, Crossing the Divide or something about crossing, because I remember that because there's a ship metaphor in it. But he tells this amazing story of a chance meeting he met with someone on a cold, windy night in Wales where they were by the fire, and a stranger to him, who they just began to chat about things that happened in their lives that shifted things. And the man began to talk about a time in his life when he was an untrustworthy person. He was an addict. He was in despair. He didn't have people around him that were true friends. And he had a moment when he was ready just to end it all. And he lived on a 17th floor flat, as they're called in London, apartment. And so he decided to jump out the window. And he wasn't eating much at that time. He wasn't taking care of himself, so he didn't have a lot of energy. But he had enough energy to climb out on the ledge. And at the ledge, there's this big flower pot there that was maybe a foot deep. And he crawled out on that thinking that he'd get over, but he had so little energy, he ended up falling into the flower pot with dirt and kind of being sprawled in there, half in, half out, and not enough energy to move out of it. Later on, he laughed about it. You're right. I mean, he was at the time, he was in this deplorable mess. But later on, he laughed at himself, kind of sprawled in this flower pot. But as he sat in there in this long trough in the dirt, his hands began to move in the dirt, and it had been raining so much. He said part of that was the reason for his despair, was the cloudiness and the rain in London at the time. But he noticed that there was a little river running from the rain through the dirt, and he began to play with the dirt and moving it around. And just in that moment, he found a stillness. He found a love. He found something healing in the dirt that he had. And he began to have something inside of him that he hadn't had in a long time, maybe never. After about an hour of just sitting in the dirt, he climbed back into his apartment, cleaned himself up, and began to notice a shift within him. So that very day he went to visit a friend, one of his friends that had kind of distanced himself because of his addictions. And the friend helped him check into detox and helped him go into recovery. And right after that, this man took a course on horticulture, and since then began to working with landscaping because he felt that was his healing. I think it's interesting that sometimes these moments that we can have are intentional and sometimes they're accidental. Even my walking up this hill, although it was an intentional walk, that moment I had was just a deeper moment that I could experience. And I think those moments are available to us at any time that we can have. Ram Dass talks about unconditional love that we find in the stillness and the quiet. That it exists in each of us. It's a part of our deep inner being. It's not so much as an act of emotion as a state of being. It's not, I love you for this reason or that reason. Not, I love you if you love me. It's love for no reason. Love without an object. You are loved for being who you are, just for existing. You don't have to do anything to earn it. Your shortcomings, your lack of self-esteem, physical perfection, social, economic status, none of that matters. No one can take this love away from you and will always be there. The universe is an example of love, like a tree, like the ocean, like my body, like my wheelchair. I see the love. And this is a picture of him later in his life when his mobility was limited to his wheelchair. And he found this love wherever he was. If I go into this place in myself that is love, and you go into this place in yourself that is love, we are together in love. Then you and I truly, in love, can be this state of being love. That's the entrance to oneness. That's the entrance to having a deeper connection with ourselves and with Spirit. And we also find that in this inner self that we can begin to plant the seeds of love, of peace, of joy that are there, not only in those moments when we take a moment of stillness, but it's there that we are planting so that it can cultivate our life, which is surrounded with this love. Whether it's just this consciousness, or whether it is friends around us, or this deeper spiritual connection we can lean into. I'm a huge fan of the Rose Bowl Parade. Someday I'd like to go to it. I just love the floats. This particular one was done by the Sikh Foundation, and this one it caught my eye. I was half watching it, doing other things. But it's literally called Planting the Seeds of Hope. And here the Sikhs are, by the way, are not Muslims. That's often confused. They're their own religion. But he's literally planting the seeds of hope, of peace and love that's part of the beliefs of the Sikhs. And so it is with us that we can plant these seeds of hope within ourselves. This one is done, boy, it's got like different kinds of seeds and flowers in it. It's quite amazing. And within us is the same kind of beauty that we can plant, that we can create, that we can understand in this life. So we plant it, we plant these seeds, and then we walk with it. I've been thinking lately, because especially when as there is some conflict, I think there's always conflict in the Middle East, seems like, or disagreements, I guess I don't want to label as conflict, but an escalation of concerns over violence and missiles that have done violence. And just wanting to hold that peace can still be attained there, that doesn't change. So I've been thinking about the path of Abraham and walking with peace. So the path of Abraham, of course, was the spiritual patriarch, if you want to call it that. Thank you for the word. Of all of Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim. So it's a common patriarch of all of those religions. And this is the area which he and his tribes walked as they were Bedouins, herding sheep, and just the walking with Spirit. And it's a metaphor for myself that all the spiritual leaders that have come and gone, whether it be Abraham or Moses or Jesus or Mohammed or Mother Teresa, Susan B. Anthony, Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., our current Women's March, all these things that what in common is they walked the spiritual path. And so we walk the spiritual path, whether it's physically we're out in nature walking it, or this metaphorical, we're walking with Spirit, because it's one thing to connect with Spirit. And then we need to go out into the world and walk with it and be it. And be it as we go through life and connect this, and we connect with other people. And I was talking about this, the beautiful greening of things that are happening right now. So it's a unfolding of this process, and we know that the green that begins at the very, very ground level. Our seeds begin to sprout that we planted, so they start small and they continue to grow. And as we walk with Spirit, we know we encounter different people, and we know we're supposed to experience God with them, but sometimes that's a challenge. Sometimes it's easy. Here it's easy. I say God and all of you. We go out in the world sometimes, really? But I love what Ram Dass says. He goes, treat everyone you meet like God in drag. So they're in disguise, sometimes very elaborate disguises. And they're God, they're Spirit. And we just walk with this knowing that we can open it up to it. And I still love his other quote about we can be still and still moving, content even in our discontent. That we don't have to have it all figured out. We really don't. We don't have to be this pure, unconditional love as we got into the world. We can just be who we are and opening to allowing. I think our life is just rounding those sharp edges we have. And sometimes our sharp edges are a little chunkier than other times. It kind of hurts to knock off one big chunk. But it's rounding us off so that we can roll and be this grace and be this love in the world. And open up to the greater way. And in this way, we're just being mindful in the awareness of Spirit in all ways. And as we walk with it, we are it, we be it, and then we allow it to empower us. I love this image because it shows the roots of this groundedness we have, and we're allowing Spirit to come through us, and we allow this growth to happen through us in this way. Ernest Holmes is famous for his phrase that there's a power in the universe greater than us. A power in the universe greater than us, and we can use it. Or we can allow it to use us. Now, that's not from an ego point of view that we can use this power for our own benefit, but it's just saying that there's a power that's greater than us, and in the indwelling Spirit that's revealing in us, we can allow it to come through us and empower us to be something greater, because we know that we can be something greater when we allow the light, this love, to shine through us. It's easy to get dismayed by current circumstances in our own life or in the greater world, in this country or in the world. And yet, as the Chinese proverb suggests, it is better to light a candle than curse the darkness. It is better to light a candle than curse the darkness. And what we also know about God, what we know about Spirit, is that creation is always a beginning and never an ending. Things may come and things may go, but creation goes on forever, as Ernest Holmes says. There's always a creative urge within us, and we can always renew ourselves. We feel it around the new year more easily, and yet we know the greater truth is always recreating itself, that we can always find the seeds of hope and love by simply being and sitting in it. And we also know we can walk with it as we go, and then we can allow it to empower us. And to come back to the words of Ram Dass, if we go to this place in ourselves that is love, and you go to this place in yourself that is love, then we together are in love. Then you and I truly, in this love, are in the state of being love. And that's the entrance to oneness. Thank you for listening today. Please know that wherever you are, Spirit is also, and that good things are happening through you in every situation you experience. Feel free to check out our website for upcoming events, and if you're able, join us for one of our Sunday services at 9 a.m. or 10:30. In the meantime, know that you are led by Spirit, guided by wisdom, and protected by love. And so it is.